From our studios around the world, this is Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast. Every month, we bring you the world's culinary tourism industry professionals and share with you strategies, tactics, and information that help make you a more effective leader, communicator, and professional in our culinary tourism industry. I'm your host, Eric Wolf. Thanks for listening. Welcome to episode 55. Today we will be speaking with Yasmine Fofana. Yasmine is a well-known force for positive change in the culinary movement in the Ivory Coast. She launched the first food blog in that country named Afrofoodie, and in doing so, she influenced others to help them understand the value of celebrating Ivorian cuisine. Her work has inspired other chefs and bloggers, not just in the Ivory Coast, but throughout West Africa as well. Yasmine is deeply passionate about shifting the narrative on Africa through using the medium of gastronomy. Yasmine, welcome to the Business of Food Travel podcast, and thank you for being on the show today. I am really excited to be speaking with you. Your name is a name that I've seen a lot in our industry, especially when it comes to the gastronomy movement in West Africa. And I would like to start the discussion today and just ask you, how did you get interested in food and tourism and hospitality?
Well, thank you, Eric, for having me. I'm really happy to be here, be on this podcast. So really, it really started by just I want to say me loving to eat, but that's a standard answer, right? For every foodie, I will say. But my journey evolved with times. It started when I was about 16 or 17, 17 when I moved to the United States for my undergraduate degrees. I was living at a time in a place called International House in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I had my roommate was Japanese, my best friend were Korean, Vietnamese, and it was just a melting pot of all those cultures from different people. And we'll have like potluck dinners where everybody would bring something, and it was really just interesting for me to start my young adult life, if I can call it that way, with so many cultures at once. And so it really spurred piqued my interest of like, there's so many cultures out there. Like, how come I didn't know about that? And so, coming back home after graduating, coming back home to my country, the Ivory Coast, I was really still trying to learn more about other cultures, but my culture specifically, because I felt like to spread the words or for other people to know about the Ivorian food culture, I myself or we have to be the best ambassador. We first have to own our story. So he started as an undergrad, but it evolved with times. And coming back home, I felt like I wanted to start a blog to share my journey, to document my journey, share what the food scene was like. And it went from there. And here I am 10 years later talking to you.
So were you the first person who had a food blog in the Ivory Coast?
I was the first person to launch a food blog. Now, by food blog, I mean it was restaurant reviews versus recipes. So it was restaurant reviews, lounges, bar, everything that was happening in a food scene, sorry. I was just like talking about it, sharing, posting, tweeting, whatnot. And yeah, so I was the first person to launch a food platform, if I can call it that way. Yeah, in Cote d'Ivoire.
And so the work that you did really helped the people within the Ivory Coast to understand, I think, the value of their culinary culture. But how did your word spread outside the country to help people to put a spotlight on your cuisine outside the country?
I guess it's really the people from the diaspora that helped out a lot, because you know how when you're living in in a different country, different from your own, like you miss home, so you try by any means possible to stay connected to home. And Ivorians in Canada, in the US, in France, they were like, if you stop this blog, we're going to be mad at you, because they were able to stay connected to Abidjan, the capital city, and everything that was happening home through the blog. So I think that was the first thing that helped out Ivorians outside. And also, thanks to the fact that, I did my undergrad in the US, so I kept my connection, with social media nowadays. It's so easy. And I did my 10 years, 9 years after that, I did my graduate studies in the UK. So, having connections both from the US, both from the UK, and also like my work experience, because I don't do this. I mean, now I do it full time, but before I wasn't doing it full time. So my, work experiences as well, like allowed me to travel, in Nigeria, in other West African countries. So wherever I was going, I was spreading the words because we'll go to all those dinners and then everybody will be eating and I'll start like taking pictures
Hmm.
of all the food and so people were like, why are you doing this again? So I would explain, okay, I started a food blog and this is what, this is how it goes. And it's been a beautiful journey, but everything was done so like everything took its time. Like I felt like there were so many seasons throughout my journey of just versus me just becoming popular all of a sudden. I guess it took time and just me spreading the word and also people spreading the word for me, if that
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And when you were writing, were you mostly writing in French or English as well?
Originally, it was just French because I thought that it was a platform for by an Ivorian for Ivorian people. And then, like I said, with meeting all those people and traveling all around, I found out that people wanted to follow, but they couldn't understand. Of course, you can translate, but it's with all those platforms that we could use nowadays, but it's never the same.
Yeah.
And because I mean, thanks to the fact that I'm also bilingual, I felt like okay, I could leverage on that as well, and that helped me tremendously because thanks to the fact that I was, a I mean, living in Francophone West Africa, but speaking English and blogging in English, I was able to get, partnerships and collaborations thanks to that. So I'm really happy that I did the switch from a just, French speaking platform to a bilingual platform. So it helps both people follow the blog and also brands and organizations being interested in my work as well. So yeah.
And I would imagine the other Francophone countries, so France and Quebec, Canada, of course, that when those people in those countries search for unusual foods or different things to experience, because you were writing in French for them, or they were able to search and read in French. So I would imagine that in those markets it helped your distribution as well.
It helped for, I would say, mainly France because of so many Ivorians and West Africans living there. Like when I check my Google Analytics stats, I can see from the stats that yes, I have an audience in France. So I would assume it wouldn't be just French people generally speaking, but mostly Ivorian. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe they're French, but I would think that it would people from the diaspora, like I mentioned before, being interested and staying connected to home. Now, from the other projects I do have people from all over the region, either West African region, so Togo, Benin, Senegal, or Francophone countries, but also Anglophone speaking countries that are interested in my work as well, and wanting to do food tours, wanting to know more, just asking questions like, I'm coming to your country, where should I go to eat? All those little interactions that you can have with people nowadays thanks to social media.
Now, I'd like to connect your interest and passion for food and gastronomy to your knowledge of tourism as well. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression that it was really your studies in both the US and the UK that helped to connect that to tourism, and you got a fellowship and you did some really interesting work. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, sure. So tourism came in definitely later on. So I started the blog in 2012, right? So 3 years down the line, where I felt like um, I felt like it was nice to do this as a hobby, but from the interactions and questions I started to had to receive, I felt like I could do so much more with it. So my point in time was like, what can I do to make this bigger than myself, to make an impact? For people to remember my country and feel like put my country on the map, basically, I mean, generally speaking. So I started to get demands and inquiries from people visiting the country and saying, hey, do you do food markets visits? And I was like, huh? what? Or, can we do like a cooking, cooking class? And I want to learn more about Ivorian cuisine. And all these questions were interesting to me. Like, first question was like, okay. And then, you get two questions, you get three questions, and you start to wonder what's going on. Why are people asking those questions? So this is where I started to learn about, thanks to Google, about food tourism and what it implies, what was in it, what wasn't in it, and how it worked in other countries. So I did a ton of research, and I started to offer food tours, but it was really informal. It was nothing fancy, nothing structured. It was just me taking people along with me, like on a food tour, quote unquote. And I started working on such a project and submitted to the Mandela Washington Fellowship, which is President Obama program. And I got accepted in 2016. And after that, I was like, okay, I really need to launch this. But I also had this imposter syndrome of I can't aspire to work in the tourism industry without having knowledge in it. And that's when a miracle happened, if I can call it like that. I got the Chieftain Scholarship. And I say a miracle because the Chieftain Scholarship is mainly offered in Commonwealth countries because it's from the British government. And Cote d'Ivoire or the Ivory Coast wasn't in the list at the time I wanted to apply. And so 3 weeks before the deadlines, my country miraculously appeared in the list. I was like, oh my God, I have to apply now. So this is how I got to do a tourism degree, international tourism development, a master's, in the UK, and really connect all the dots because learning, really having this deep dive in the tourism industry, learning what it's really about, what it entails, the challenges the industry is facing, but also focusing as a niche on food tourism, how I can use that to drive the economic development of my countries.
The World Food Travel Association is the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Founded in 2001, each year we serve a community of 200,000 professionals in more than 150 countries. Thinking about a career change because of the pandemic or looking to improve your current skills? Consider our bespoke training and certification programs in culinary tourist guiding, culinary tour operations, restaurant and food service, and culinary destination marketing. Visit academy.worldfoodtravel.org to learn more and get started. That's fantastic. And you've had a very interesting trajectory in terms of developing your business and career and I would say helping the Ivorian cuisine really to become better known. So in addition to your food blog, so now we added in the ingredient of tourism and you launched the first restaurant week in Cote d'Ivoire and also you launched a food tour company. So you just kept growing.
I did. I did. It's been an amazing journey. And if someone had told me 10 years ago that I would do that, I would I would laugh probably because all those things were pretty foreign to me. But I want to say to everyone, how the industry just grew from all over, evolved all throughout these past years. So yeah, it's been a beautiful journey, and I still can't believe that I'm doing this for a living. Like, I get to eat and discover and share, and yeah, and live from that. Yeah, I'm truly grateful.
So what's your next big project? A cookbook or a TV show? Netflix special?
Uh, well, right now I'm working on a TV show with an Ivorian chef here in Cote d'Ivoire. We really want to, like I mentioned before, we really want to own our stories, but also rediscover our traditional cuisine. Because being born in the capital city and having lived here all my life, you feel like there's so much more out there that we don't know about. Whenever a tourist come in, or even ourselves, like we'll stick to the traditional, the classics, like I like to call them. Like you can have like fried fish or barbecued fish because we live by the coast, or barbecued chicken with fried plantains and things like that, which is like street food and pretty classic that everybody loves. But there are so many other meals and other dish that nobody knows about. The Ivory Coast has more than 60 ethnic groups, and each and every one of them has their own way of making their own meals, their cooking techniques, and all that. And I feel like I don't know them. and I want to learn them. And with the chef, so what we're doing, we're traveling within different regions of Cote d'Ivoire and really documenting that. So we're hoping to get a TV deal soon, and yeah, and keep working on that. And what's next for me personally? Once I'm done, well, I don't think I'll ever be done with discovering Ivorian food, but once that project is well and going, I would like to keep on traveling within West Africa and also share my journey online. I've done Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, but I also want to go to Cameroon. I also want to go to Togo and Benin. I want to go back to South Africa. I want to go up north. I want to go to Uganda. So yeah, I really want to travel around the continent and taste all the good foods that we have. And why not partner with Netflix one day? Hey, the sky's the limit. So hey, I'm really looking forward to all of that.
Yeah. I don't think people realize how large Africa is as a continent. I was
Mm-mm.
looking at a map and someone had put in, I think they had put in China, the United States, and many of the European countries, and there was still room left over. Have you seen that
Yeah.
map? Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that online. Yeah.
And that's just it's mind-boggling. But hey, I want to go back to something you were saying. You said that there's 60 different ethnic groups in the Ivory
Mm.
Coast, and this is
Yeah.
something that we see a lot in other countries, like Nepal has this situation,
Mm-hmm.
China, India, Ghana as well. And when
Mm-hmm.
you have so many different ethnic groups, do you find that there's one that dominates and it starts to change the other culinary cultures, or do you find that the other culinary cultures still find a way to thrive and make their voice heard?
Oh yeah, they I think they all thrive at the same time. Because what's interesting is, I think people generally speaking, but I want to stick to what I know. Ivorians are very proud. Let's say there's the Akan tribe. So if I am from the Akan tribe and you're from the another tribe, you will be proud to say, this is where I'm from, this is where my people are from, this is where my village is. And so you will link all that to, of course, your culture, your dance, the ethnic costumes and things like that, but also the food. So wherever we are, there's always that joke of my food is better than yours and my culture is better than yours, but in a fun, jokingly way. And so I really think that people really try, I mean, cultures, culinary cultures, just thrive at the same time. Of course, depending on how, let's say, a culture will be close to the capital city. If a tourist was to come in the country, they'll probably have more of that food or that cuisine just because it's close to where they are, unless you do travel outside of the capital city. So yeah, they all thrive and do well, I will say.
Are there statistics about people who come to the Ivory Coast for the food, or are they coming for primarily something else? I mean, I would imagine the visiting friends and relatives is a big reason, but maybe beach
Mhm.
tourism as well from countries like France. But how are people, are they discovering the country as a food destination yet, or would you still say that it's kind of a niche interest?
To answer your first question, as far as I know, there are no specific stats on the type of tourists that we receive, and that's unfortunately a shame. But yeah, there are no stats concerning that. So I would assume that definitely visiting friends or relatives is number one. But if I'm not mistaken, from back in 2018 or 2019, there were some articles and announcement from the Ministry of Tourism that we were the third business tourism destination on the continent after Nigeria and Morocco. I'll have to double check on that. I'm not saying anything wrong, but if my memory serves me right, we were third the business destination. So when people will come for business, of course, everybody has to eat 3 times a day at least. But on weekends, those same tourists will try to go to the beach resorts or to mainly beach resorts around the capital city because that's not too far from the hotels, and of course try the local cuisine. So I see an opportunity in that to develop food tourism, but I don't think anything has been done in that regard yet specifically.
the Ivorian government it hasn't dawned on them yet about the potential that they have?
No, they haven't, as far as food tourism is concerned. But you know how food is always included in tourism offers? Like, let's say you go spend a day at a resort, you will eat, right? Because lunchtime and you eat. So
Most
there
important
will, there,
task, right?
I know, right? So there will be local cuisine offered. But what I'm trying to say is that for me, I see something much more elaborated or structured around the food, not just offering the meal as a lunch and saying, hey, the buffet is open, but saying, what are you eating? Where is it from what culture it's from, and really develop that storytelling around the food, because that's how people learn, right? And so in that regard, I don't think anything has been done. The new tourism bureau, it's called Côte d'Ivoire Tourism, is trying to work in that sense, and hopefully I'm looking forward to try to talk to them and see what we can do together to try to focus more on those offers and really showcase what we have here.
I agree with you 100%. I think that a lot of hotels really miss a marketing opportunity, or maybe it's a marketing collaboration with the National Tourism Office. When you do go to a resort and, like you said, the buffet is open, okay, well, people, it's just like cows going in to be fed at the trough, right? I mean, no one knows what they're eating, no one cares. It's just putting something in their stomachs. And even in places like I was at the JW Marriott Resort, the Red Sea, and I was a guest there, and they had all of the foods out, but they just so there's one dish in the Middle East called fool, and it's a bean dish, a casserole type thing,
Okay.
and it's served in this big pot that looks kind of like an amphora, but it's on its at an angle, and it stays on the heat, and it keeps the dish warm while people are
Mm-hmm.
going around and stuff. And it's really quite delicious. But you see this, and there's no story about it. What country did this come from? What ingredients are in it? Not even
Exactly.
food allergies or anything about that. Nothing about the
Mm.
story. And I'm thinking that each of those dishes is an opportunity to maybe showcase a face behind the place, someone who is known like a chef or a personality or a YouTuber or you, for instance. This is Yasmine's favorite dish from Ivory Coast, and featuring you. What would you say would be the top three dishes that every tourist visitor should try in Ivory Coast?
Oh, that's a hard one. That's a hard one.
Tell me about the
So
fish, because
hard.
I continue to search the world for good fish, and I'm kind of running out of options now.
Well, it's we have, I guess, all the fish you can taste in the world. Like, being by the coast, we have, of course, tilapia, which is like the main, I guess, the main fish that you find. We also have salmon. We have a lot of seafood. Oh my God. And it's so fresh because it's right here. So definitely seafood, but that's not anything I want to say different from what you will know. What will differ will be the spice that will be added, how it'll be marinated, how it'll be served, and the side dish that will come with it. But yeah, definitely what makes the difference is the spices. The spices that we use that are very local spices, and the side dish.
What are some of the predominant spices there?
We use a lot of ginger. We use curcuma, cumin again, but then we have like local spices. So Akpi, for example, AKPI, it's a little grain that's typical from Cote d'Ivoire. It has this bitter sweet taste, and it's when it's like it's mashed, so you can use that to marinate as well. In a lot of stews, people use that as well. It gives that nice taste, but also nice scent to the taste.
Mm.
Aroma, sorry, to the stew. So we have some local pepper that is very good. We grow our own in region like Tia Salé. It's pretty much like a luxury product nowadays. Black pepper, red pepper, white and green. And local entrepreneurs, they use that as well. There has been a lot of made in Cote d'Ivoire entrepreneur nowadays. So they transform a lot of our product. Like they will transform the spice, like the pepper. They will also transform anything from fruits to, like, dried fruits. So they use our local fruits with it as well. So yeah, people are transforming a lot. There's really been a movement about eating Ivorian food and promoting Ivorian food and product to Ivorians, but also to outsiders as well.
Let's say that I come to visit you in the Ivory Coast and I fly into Abidjan, you meet me at the airport, and you say, Eric, we're
Mhm.
going to go on a food tour. What would be the first three places you'd take me, and what would we be eating there?
Okay, so definitely fish to start with. We'll have to ease your way in. We'll have some barbecue fish. We call it poisson braisé, right? So it's the tilapia that has been marinated with different spices, and then it's basically I say barbecue to make it easy for you to understand, but it's like on a charbon grill, and just cooked in front of you, mainly on the streets. You will eat that with achike. So acheke is made out of cassava. It's like our main. It's truly Ivorian acheke, and so you will use it's grated cassava that has been dried, and it's pretty much if you want to compare to something like I want to say couscous like grain, but it could be bigger or smaller than couscous. It depends on the type of on which region it was from. And then you will eat that with a mix of like tomato, like a salsa dish, a salsa mix, like tomato and onions and garlic and all those spices. So we'll have that. We'll have fish because, of course, I feel like you cannot go wrong with fish. But I will also have you take some kejenu. So a kejenu is like a tomato. It's a very simple dish actually. So kejenu in Baule, which is a ethnic language, means to shake. So basically, it's made in those. I don't know if you've seen those online, but it's like a round bowl made out of clay, and basically it's like a traditional dish, right? And so you put in all the ingredients together, like the tomato, the onions, the type of protein you want. If it's fish, mainly chicken, you have the chicken in, you have your spices in, and then you will just close it with a banana leaf, and then you just shake it, and then you will cook. Like, of course, you put water in, and then you will just let it cook for like an hour or so, and then that's it. The stew is done. And so it's a very simple dish, but so delicious because it's really some people don't even put oil in it. So it's really like healthy, just basically like vegetables and chicken. And you will have that with rice, with white rice, or again with the achike, like I mentioned. And last but not least, I'll have you try fried plantain is everywhere, so I won't have you try that. But I'll have you try my favorite, which is fufu. Now, the fufu in Ivory Coast is different than the fufu in Ghana. The fufu in Ghana is pounded, right? The fufu in Ivory Coast is smashed. So it's plantains that has been boiled before and it's smashed with palm oil, and it's so good. And so it's like the woman put it in like a round shape, and you eat that with a soup. So it's a soup made out of aubergine, and you just have a slice of fufu, and then you just drink the soup on the side. So those are the three main dishes I'll have you try to start with.
Wow, it sounds delicious. And what are people drinking there?
Well, local beer. We have our own brasserie. I don't know the term. Breweries. Thank
Yes,
you.
brewery, that's right.
Breweries in Côte d'Ivoire. So local beers. Now, traditional drink. We have what we call banji. I don't know. It's palm wine, which is a drink pretty popular around West Africa. So we have bunji, which is palm wine. People drink that a lot. It's sweet. Yeah, it has different tastes according to the number of days that you keep it, right? So I guess it gets sweeter over time. Now, if you don't drink alcohol, of course, you have we call bisap, the hibiscus. I don't know if you tried that before. The drink made out of hibiscus flowers. It's red.
Oh, that
If
sounds
you had
nice.
that, yeah, it's sweet. And then we have the ginger juice, which is also pretty popular within West Africa. Again, it's funny how I like to mention like whenever I do podcasts or I talk to people, like how well before colonization the continent was a big, everybody was kind of living together. And so the fact that we're colonized and we know how all these different countries, like the cultures and the food cuisines evolve with those people, with people and different cultures. So the fact that we're colonized by the French, impacted our cuisine, of course, versus Ghana being next door, being colonized by the British. So if you traveled around West Africa, you found a lot of similar dish or drink, but with different names, which makes it very interesting.
So how much culinary colonialism would you say is there in the Ivory Coast right now?
That's an interesting question. I won't be able to quantify, but from what I see, especially with the upcoming like talents and chefs who live in the capital, but as they were able to go do their like culinary studies outside of the country, right? So they mainly go to like the Bocuse Institute or Le Nôtre Institute and like, study abroad, in France or the United States. They would come back with these gastronomy techniques, for example, and then mix that with the traditional Ivorian cuisine. And so it's called, generally speaking, it's called Afrofusion. It's the mix of, the African cuisine, and the fusion, comes in with all those techniques that you try to blend in with the local ingredients. So
Hmm.
again, I won't be able to quantify, but I feel like we have a lot of, I mean, our cuisine, or high-end cuisine is definitely has a lot of impact from the French cuisine. But then again, I won't be able to say how much of it
Sure.
and things like that. But you can see it from how the plates, the meal are presented to you, the visual aspect, pretty much the visual aspects of it. Because traditional Ivorian cuisine or African cuisine, for that matter, it's most of the time presented in like round bowls, because we have this communal way of eating. I mean, we used to, people still do nowadays, but there were a communal way of eating where everybody would eat together in the same plate with their hands. Hence the communal dish, like round bowls with the rice or whatever the meal was, everything together, right? But now, because of high-end restaurants, different type of concepts, different type of chefs, and everything happening nowadays, it has evolved from a traditional dish will not be served in that round bowl. It may be served, in the nice plate with different design. It will still be the same ingredients though, but presented differently. And that's what I think makes it interesting as well. It also creates an interesting debate of, are we losing our food culture because of the influence of others? So it's always an interesting debates among chefs and bloggers or food creators and things like that.
It is an interesting discussion, and I think that I hear this debate in other countries too. And on one
Mm,
hand, you could argue that it's helping cuisine to evolve. It's also serving as a gateway to tourists who
exactly.
come in who maybe the traditional dishes are a little too traditional for them to start with, right? And you can kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
ease their way into that cuisine. But then the other thing is, I mean, many culinary anthropologists will tell you that cuisines change every 80 to 100 years. So the food that you're eating today, the food that I'm eating today is not the same food that our grandparents ate 100 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
that evolution is a necessary part of cuisine. So I don't know. I could go either way on that. I do think that there's many aspects of traditional foods that could stand to be improved. I remember once I was in the country, and I'm not going to say what country it was, but the dish I was
Tell me
presented
the
with the
continent
salad.
at least.
And I was presented with a salad that it was literally swimming in olive oil. And there was so much olive oil. I mean, there must have been ladles of it, just, so much olive oil. And it was just, I know olive oil is healthy, but the amount of fat was just unbelievable. And I tried to make the polite suggestion that maybe for visitors, they might want to consider modifying the recipe. And my local contact became absolutely livid. They could not believe that I would suggest changing an authentic recipe. But, I mean, it was like a bowl of olive oil with some grains in it, basically. And I
Okay.
can't imagine that that was truly a traditional dish. And if so, then I'm completely showing my ignorance. But I mean, would you want to sit down to a bowl of olive oil?
No, thank you.
As much as I love
No,
it,
thank
but
you.
it was a traditional. recipe that I think really could have done with some modification.
And yeah, and I feel the same way too. It could go either way because here too we do have some stews or soups that use a lot of palm oil,
Hmm.
from the palm nut tree, and so it's red in color. For local, they be, oh my God, this is the traditional way, but from someone coming from the outside and saying that, it may not be appealing to that person for so many reasons. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you that food has to evolve now to a certain degree, or the debate. We can go on and on about this, and I'm
Well, you're right. I've seen those dishes, those stews or soups where maybe they're being cooked on a fire and it looks very traditional. And then you see the layer of oil on top. And you just say to yourself,
yes,
this cannot be healthy. No one wants to eat that.
yeah, but people do, and
They
people are
do.
really happy, like with olive oil.
I know, I know, I know. Well, the other argument is that oil is a fat and it fills you up and it prevents you from getting hungry. Maybe my palate is just not all the rage right now. Looking towards the future of our industry, in
Mm,
an interesting position because you are in a region of the world that I think has so much potential to develop its gastronomy and really become more known as gastronomy destinations. Yet at the same time, you are suffering from everything else the world is as well. We're just coming out of the
yeah.
pandemic. There's supply chain shocks, energy shortages, food shortages. What do you see as the greatest concern facing gastronomy tourism development in the Ivory Coast going forward?
The thing is, it's so hard to answer that question because it's not even, I want to say it's not even developed yet. So it's not like the future for me right now would be for people to consider it as an important tourism niche that needs to be looked at as much as business tourism, as much as sports tourism or religious tourism. For me, the most urgent thing right now is to really understand the impact it can have on our economic development, to start with. And then once we do understand, it's one thing, like we said before, to say the buffet is open. It's another thing to develop a whole storytelling around it and have people from those different cultures we talked about before explain it and really try to pass it on from generations to generations, because that's another thing that we didn't discuss. But I feel like with the newer generations, there's so many loss in the way because of transmission is not done the right way, and maybe the younger generation is not that interested in keeping the traditional dish, as well. So there's so many layers to the challenges we're facing. But first and foremost will be to start considering that tourism niche, and okay, it's a niche as its own. It's not just a breakfast or lunch or dinner. It's something that needs to be looked at and leveraged on for people to develop and for African nations to really develop themselves as gastronomic destination. And then we can look at all the other challenges we're facing with food and hygiene, hygiene when it comes to food safety as well, because that's something we didn't talk about, but sometimes not the priority for a lot of vendors out there, especially when it comes to street food or even like small restaurants. Yeah, the challenges are endless, but I also feel like from the challenges, endless opportunities or limitless opportunities can be created. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know I didn't answer your question per se, but there's so much in my head that I want to say, because that's a real challenge for me, and it's kind of frustrating as well. For me, trying to showcase how important it is, and for people to just consider it as a meal versus a tourism niche that has a full potential.
I think
So
you're right. The idea of things like health and safety, those are issues that are all over the world. It's just not unique to your
mm,
region. And I think even more so after the pandemic, people are paying
exactly,
more
yeah.
attention to how well dishes are cleaned or how servers present you the drink. Do they touch the rim of the glass with their hand, that kind of thing. And people are becoming
Mm,
hyper aware of that, which is probably a good thing that we were a little more pay more attention to health and safety than we did before. But I also
mhm,
think that Africa in general, with the exception of a few specific countries, notably Morocco, Ethiopia, and maybe South Africa, or some specific dishes from South Africa. I think that the
mhm.
continent in general is largely unknown for its cuisine. I mean, if you talk to anyone
Yeah.
about Latin America, people can say things like feijoada from Brazil, or the grilled meats from Argentina, or the
Mhm,
empanadas that are well known. And people know that coffees and fruits come from Latin America, right? And people can
mhm,
talk about that. Or if you talk about Southeast Asia, the same thing. People can tell you some of the spices that come from there, some of the important dishes. But I think that your
mhm.
region, it's just unknown.
It is.
People, if
It
if
is.
someone's really dialed in, they might be able to tell you, oh, I've heard of West African peanut soup. But okay, what
Yeah.
else comes from Africa, right? There's so much on the continent, and it's such a vast continent that I
It
think
is.
that one of the wonderful things about our industry is that food and drink lovers are explorers, and we're always looking for the next big thing, the next new thing, the next undiscovered
Mhm.
thing. And how many times can you take someone on a food tour of Paris or New York or San Francisco? Yes, businesses change, but it's kind of predictable. But take me
Mhm.
somewhere where I haven't been. This makes
Mhm.
me, I talk about this guy a lot in the podcast, and I probably shouldn't again, but he's just so good at what he does. There's a YouTuber, his name is Sunnyside, and he's the host of the Best Ever Food Review Show. Have you ever seen his shows?
I think so. I think so. He went to Nigeria, no?
Correct. Yes, he did an episode in Nigeria, which apparently
Yeah, I
was one
think
of the hardest
so.
episodes they ever filmed, which is interesting. I'd like to know more about
Yeah.
that. But the way he gets into the local culinary cultures, he's been to Uzbekistan and Iran and India, and of course, lots of places in Southeast Asia, Kenya, and he really gets down into the food culture and meets the local people. And he does so, and I think in a very respectful but also kind of cheeky way. He is able to share jokes with the locals in
Mhm.
a positive way, and also he shares a little bit of an unwritten understanding with the audience as well, because he has a dish put in front of him that he knows his viewers may not really be interested in, but he's going to try it, right? And he does, and
Yeah.
it's all good, right? And so I think that more shows like that can really put the spotlight on some of the unusual dishes or the work that you're doing. I mean, maybe I would love to see your work be turned into a new series on Netflix where we could talk about the world's undiscovered cuisines. And first stop
Yeah.
is Ivory Coast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you are so right. It's funny because whenever I speak to a Nigerian or a Ghanaian, I tell them at least you guys have the jollof war. Jollof rice, right?
Yeah.
So, that used to at least pique interest of some people like, what is jollof rice and why are Nigerians and Ghanaians fighting about this? But that was some interest. It's interesting that a lot of people don't know that the Ivory Coast is the first world producer of cocoa. And all the nice chocolate that people eat in Sweden and France and sometimes the US, it's either coming from the Ivory Coast or Ghana. Nobody knows about that.
You are absolutely
But
right.
yeah, there's so much to learn. But then again, I always come back to this. If I myself as an Ivorian, I don't know about this, or I don't share about it, or a Ghanaian or a Kenyan doesn't is not a proper ambassador to its cuisine to others, how are you going to know? So the work starts with us first. As in, a Japanese would be proud of his sushi culture or everything around that and all these meals, and same for a Thai person or French are really proud about their cuisine, right?
Hmm.
But how about ourselves? Like, we have to do the work, and that's really what I try to do on a daily basis, like to just be out there and share, even if it's just one person that reads a blog post or a tweet or sees the videos and shows some kind of interest. I would feel like I would have won somewhere. But then again, there's so much more work to be done. And yeah, so it's definitely an interesting journey ahead for what's next.
Well, I know we need to wrap up soon, but I just wanted to make one comment on the chocolate because you really got my mind thinking about that. I think about countries where the raw ingredients originate from. And if we're talking
Yeah.
chocolate, obviously Ivory Coast, Ghana, Indonesia as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Brazil, Grenada, they all make the cocoa beans or grow the cocoa beans. I
Hmm.
don't know, except for one chocolate producer on the island of Grenada, which, by the way, is one of our culinary capitals that our
Okay.
association has certified. I don't really hear about people going to places like Ivory Coast or Ghana or Indonesia for chocolate tourism. And when I was in Indonesia, I was asking my hosts there, I said, well, I know that you have a very large cacao bean industry here. Tell me about this. I'd love to try some Indonesian chocolates. And
Hmm.
they were really strapped for getting me a good example of an Indonesian product. And I also saw this in South Africa too, where I was living for a while, where they
Hmm.
actually imported you're going to love this. They imported their chocolate from Belgium. Yes, because there was a grant from the Belgian government to having to do with chocolate manufacturing and I don't know exactly all the details, but basically the Belgian government gave them money to import equipment from Belgium and to import the chocolate from Belgium. So can you imagine chocolate coming from Ghana or Ivory Coast going to Belgium to be processed and then shipped back to South Africa? Makes no
That's
sense to
that's
me.
it makes no sense. I mean, on our end, a lot of, like I mentioned before, what I call the made in Cote d'Ivoire, made in the Ivory Coast, to make it easier. Local entrepreneurs. There are also some entrepreneurs looking working into the chocolate now. I can mention, like at the top of my head, like five or six working in really transforming the chocolate locally. Because as you mentioned before, the cocoa beans were just exported to all these other countries, but now a lot of young and they're mainly young entrepreneurs are really trying to work it here. What makes it difficult is the cost for the, like, for any Ivorian wanting to eat the chocolate. Like the chocolate culture is not like really embedded in our everyday lives yet, and it's kind of costly to afford like a chocolate bar that was made locally. Again, it's another debate for another day, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done there as well, and to be shared with people so people know.
Well, Yasmin, you've definitely convinced me. I really want to come visit your country soon and meet you
Oh
and try your
God.
wonderful foods. And the same when I was talking with our association's ambassador in Ghana, and she just made
Mm,
the food come alive. You know, it's again, the faces behind the places. I think part of it's the fascination with unknown foods, but also the other part is the stories that people are telling and the stories that you have shared
mm,
today are really inspirational. They make me want to come to visit you and to try your wonderful food and to try your favorite foods. And so I can go back then and tell my friends and family and everybody else that follows me in the world, I can say, "Oh my gosh, I had chocolate from Ivory Coast where the cacao beans
mm,
come from. And let me tell you, it's some of the
exactly.
best chocolate I've had on the planet."
I'm looking forward to hosting you.
Well, Yasmin, thank you so much for your time today. It's such a pleasure knowing you, working with you, and your work here in the association as an ambassador of our work there in West Africa. And I really appreciate all you do, and I look forward to doing more with you in the future. Thank you for your time.
But thank you again for having me, Eric.
That's it for this episode of the Eat Well, Travel Better podcast. This episode is brought to you by the World Food Travel Association and its World Food Travel Academy program. We'd like to hear from you regarding the podcast. We invite you to share your ideas, questions, and thoughts by emailing us at help@worldfoodtravel.org, or you can connect with us and comment about the episode on major social media platforms. Special thanks to our guest Yasmine Fofana, and our thanks to you for joining us. I'm Eric Wolf, wishing you a safe, happy, and productive month ahead.